Welcome inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, where Ohio State just wrapped up its third practice of preseason camp, and I think we would both agree, Garrick, by far the most intense practice we've seen here at camp so far. Certainly, I think the best day for evaluating that we've had here so far through 3 days of camp. We saw well over 2 hours of practice out there, lots of 11 on 11 full team drills for the first time in camp. They had the pads on today. You could just see it was a different level of intensity for the Buckeyes today.
Well, tight end Bennett Christian set the tone. The second he walked in, he was screaming, saying hello to the fans. There's about 1,000 or so that were here, and he just went, "First day, full pads, boys, let's go!" And that's honestly kind of how it felt. I was like, oh, they're thudding today, they're doing some hitting, and honestly it was pretty enjoyable to watch those guys get after it. Like you were saying, Dan, there were a lot of standouts. There's one in particular that I know you're going to want to gush about in your observations, and the one that everyone's going to want to hear about. So, Dan, tell us about what you saw from Julian Sayin today.
Yeah, I think today was Julian's best day that we've seen from him so far. I think today was really the first day that I came out of camp feeling like there was a clear winner of the day between those first two quarterbacks, and I think that guy was Julian Sayin today. I think Julian, did a nice job, was crisp with his passes. Really not any, clear mistakes that I can remember. I mean, maybe a couple passes that were slightly off target, but I think he was very efficient. He made good decisions at the ball. Had a couple of really nice throws to Jeremiah. There was one in particular in team drills. We were both watching together. Bryce West had good coverage on Jeremiah Smith, but Julian lofted it right over him down the left sideline, and then Jeremiah made a great diving catch. And you see a moment like that. There was another deep ball between those two in 7-on-7 earlier in the day. Those are the moments where you see the potential of what that Julian Sayin, Jeremiah Smith combo could be. Now, we were talking about during the practice. Like right now, I don't look at either Julian Sayin or Lincoln Kienholz and say, I think this guy's going to be C.J. Stroud from day one or Justin Fields from day one. I think there's still a ways to go for both those guys, including Julian, to get to that point. But I also think through 3 days of practice, I think back to 2 years ago, the Kyle McCord-Devin Brown battle. And I think these guys are further ahead of where those guys were. Like, I come out of these 3 days of camp, which, we're not going to get to watch much more practice before the season. I come out of these 3 days feeling like, I feel like Ohio State's in a pretty good spot. I think there's still growth that needs to happen, but I feel like if Ohio State needed either one of these guys to play against Texas, that they would at least have a chance. I do think that Julian is more likely to be that guy, and I think today affirmed that more in my mind, that Julian is the front runner in this competition. Not in terms of reps, they took an equal number of reps today still, but I think Julian was the sharper quarterback, and I think particularly in those team drills, you could just see more accuracy, more efficiency of his decision making, whereas I think Lincoln had his moments over the course of the day, but I think he struggled a little bit in that team portion.
One thing I will say about Lincoln is that I've been very impressed with the way he's composed himself in red zone drills, especially today, but also for the first two practices. He's looked very efficient, he's made quick decisions, and I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio State did what they did for Devin Brown and put in maybe a red zone package for him, especially in a big game like Texas right away coming out. Give him a look that maybe Texas isn't expecting right away. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that once or twice, especially just how he's built too, with a 6'3", 200+ pound frame. He's a guy that can really be a running threat down there too. And not saying that he is not in contention for the job still, but it seems that Julian Sayin has maybe taken a slight step ahead of him after what we've seen the last couple of practices. Well, obviously still got a ways to go to determine the front runner there, but Dan, I wouldn't be surprised if both of them play at least a little bit, kind of similar to what you were saying with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown 2 seasons ago. But yeah, I think Julian Sayin looked pretty composed, pretty decisive, and the thing that I was impressed more with Julian about today is that when they were in team periods, each took reps with the second team, and the first team offensive line looked pretty solid, looked pretty efficient, but the second team defensive line had a pretty superior day over the second team offensive line. So both quarterbacks had a lot of pressure in their face when they were running with that second team. And frankly, Julian handled it a lot better than Lincoln did. And that's probably where Lincoln has the most room for growth right now.
To your point, I think outside of a quarterbacks, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me today was the defensive line. I feel like really won the day up front, particularly those defensive ends. And I think it's important to clarify, you talk about first versus second team there. Well, they were rotating 4 defensive ends with those first and second teams. So those backup offensive tackles, Ian Moore and Phillip Daniels, they were going against Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, Beau Atkinson, and C.J. Hicks, and those guys were rotating through with both teams. And I think all four of those guys have been impressive for 3 days of camp. I think the guy who really caught my eye today was C.J. Hicks, and that's been one of the big questions coming into camp is C.J. Hicks for real deal? Is C.J. Hicks ready to be a full-time defensive end? Can he make that transition? And I think today we saw a lot of good things from C.J. Hicks. Now, a lot of it's pass rush stuff. I think the big question of C.J. Hicks is still going to be how consistent can he be as a run defender. But he blew up a lot of plays today, and I just look at that defensive end group here for 3 days. I thought Caden Curry had a really good day today. Beau Atkinson, there were a couple times, especially when he was going up against Phillip Daniels, where he just kind of blew him over and got to the quarterback. We've heard a lot of great things about Kenyatta Jackson. I think he's had a solid first few days of camp. I think those four guys, you're really seeing the makings of what could be a really good defensive end rotation. Big shoes to fill with Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, but I think the good thing is I don't think Ohio State needs any one of those guys individually to be Jack Sawyer or JT Tuimoloau. I think we're going to see a lot more rotation at that position this year, and I think if all four of those guys can build off what we've seen so far, Ohio State has a chance to have a really good defensive end rotation.
I also like a lot what I'm seeing from the running backs, at least today. James Peoples had a nice big long run in team drills that really showcased his breakaway speed on an outside play. Bo Jackson is really scrappy, running between the tackles or running outside. C.J. Donaldson looks as advertised. You know what you're going to get from West Virginia. And Turbo Rogers has made quite the impression all over the place. He can line up in a lot of different spots. Now, he's still a freshman. He just got here a couple weeks ago, so there are going to be some learning curves. Had a fumble today, had to go take a lap around, but you can see the shiftiness, you can see the speed, and you can see why Carlos Laughlin's really high on Turbo Rogers.
Another guy who's really stood out to me so far in this camp has been Davison Igbinosun. I think he's a guy, a couple years as a starter, you expect him to be one of the best players out there in the field, but obviously, there's been the questions about the penalties. I think, honestly, going into camp, I'm probably coming in thinking Jermaine Matthews Jr. is going to be the top corner for Ohio State this year, and that could still be the case. I think he's had a good first few days of camp, too. But Davison, you've just noticed him making plays every day out there. He had a pick against Julian Sayin the first day of camp. Today, there were a couple times you could tell he was excited that they were fudding up today, that he was getting really physical up there. I think the secondary in general is another position group. Again, not a huge revelation that they have a lot of talent in that secondary, but I just thought there was a lot of physicality from those guys today. I think you can really see the makings of another really good secondary. Obviously, Caleb Downs is the centerpiece of that. We continue to see him kind of moving all over the formation. Was noticeable today. We saw Jaylen McClain get a lot of run with that first team. Now, Malik Hartford was out there too, but it did seem like most of the time Jaylen McClain was the guy playing that strong safety role with the first team defense. Whereas a lot of times when Malik came in, it was when Caleb was down playing nickel, lining up elsewhere, and Malik was playing that free safety role. So still a competition there, but it does feel like Jaylen McClain is making a move, especially after he was named an Iron Buckeye yesterday, that he could be making a move toward that starting strong safety job.
It's been fun watching practice the last 3 days. An Ohio State spokesman kind of joked with us when we came in and said, boys, if you like watching practice, enjoy today, because you probably won't see another one until the college football playoff. So we've relished the opportunity to be able to watch and see what these guys really bring to the table for the first 3 days. Dan, you've watched nearly every rep of the team period in the past 3 practices. It's only 3 practices. There's 20 plus more to go before Texas. But what was the one takeaway that you had from the past 3 days that really sticks out to you?
I think just in general, I think there's a lot of talent on this team. We know this team lost a ton of talent from last year, but you look around the roster, and I think you can see the pieces for this to be one of the best teams in the country again. There's still some questions to be settled. We talked about defensive tackle depth. Obviously, still have to solidify a starting quarterback. But I think if you just go around, the rest of a roster, running backs, you talk about, I think the running backs have looked good all 3 days. The wide receivers, they're clearly going to be elite again. Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, they've all looked fantastic these first few days of camp. I think that offensive line, it feels pretty solid. I think we noticed today, I thought maybe you'd see more rotation with that first team offensive line. Every time the first team was out there in 11-on-11, it was Ethan Anianwa at left tackle, Luke Montgomery at left guard, Carson Hinsman at center, Tegra Shabola at right guard, and Austin Searveld at right tackle. So it feels like they've settled on a starting 5. I think the depth at offensive line is maybe a little bit more of a question than maybe I thought coming in. I just in terms of Are Ian Moore, Phillip Daniels really ready to be that next man up? Is Josh Padilla really ready to be that next man up in the middle? Because I do think the second team offensive line struggled today, but I also think the upside is a little bit higher on those guys than maybe it was a year ago for the second team. I think that they have the pieces they need, but there's still some growth that needs to take place with those backup offensive linemen. But, you know, again, on the defensive side of the ball, I think that defensive end rotation's looking great so far. Defensive tackle depth still a question mark, but, you know, we saw Tywan Malone making some plays today. He seems like a guy who's maybe surging a little bit, is somebody who could lock down a spot in that 2-deep, be a contributor there at defensive tackle. Linebackers, I mean, Sonny Styles, Arvell Reese, Peyton Pierce, you're seeing all of them make plays out there. I think they've got a really good top three there at linebacker. Already talked about the secondary. So I just think across the board, this is a team with a lot of talent. We're going to see. I mean, four weeks from today, we're going to see how good this team really is, because you can't get a much bigger season opener than Ohio State versus Texas, and that's what makes this preseason so exciting is, you know, some years it's like, well, you have camp and then you kind of have preseason for like 2 or 3 more weeks. This year, you're going to get right into it. You're going to play a top 5 team, and we're going to see how good this team really is. But I think coming out of here on 3 days in, you know, some years you come out of those first couple practices of camp and you go, man, I'm really worried about this position. I don't have a position like that right now. I think looking across the board, I feel like the pieces are there for this team to be a contender again. I do think there will be some bumps in the road just because you are replacing so much experience from last year. But I think the potential is there for this team to be the best team in the country. I'm not saying they're going to be, but I think you can see the talent there on both sides of the ball where there's the potential for this team to be a championship contender again.
Well, Ohio State fans certainly hope that you're right. It's been a fun 3 days of covering practice. Unfortunately, our coverage of practice has to end, but our coverage of the team certainly does not slow down anytime soon. We'll be back with a lot more videos next week, talking to a lot more guys, and Dan, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun 4 weeks until Texas.
Yep, another busy week of coverage here ahead next week as Ohio State continues to ramp up preseason camp. So lots more to come on 11warriors.com and 11 Warriors YouTube channel. We hope you'll join us there. For now, he's Garrett Hodge. I'm Dan Hope. This has been Press Coverage. Thanks for joining in.